How much shock can you stand?
It's been a while. Welcome back to LarryLand. Welcome, Karan. Thank you for being with me today.
Hey, always happy to make the trip to LarryLand.
Hey, and I love that you're on the bridge of the Enterprise D, which is very appropriate. We're going to be discussing Mr. Data from Star Trek The Next Generation, famously portrayed by Brent Spiner, supposedly for the last time in the Picard Season 1. You know, we'll see. Enough money gets thrown anyone's way.
Yes.
Although they did kind of close out his story, but we'll get there. Let's not jump too far ahead. Straight away, Karan, what was your first impressions of Data? The series started in what, 84, 85? No, 85, I think, right?
Okay, I didn't do that part of the research. I would say I thought it was 87.
Okay, well, it was in the 8 because I thought they had not playing commercials, but I know when Star Trek 4 came out, The Next Generation either had their first season out. The point is there was some contention between the original cast and the new cast. Famously, we were at a convention and someone had asked Shatner, "Why are you using The Next Generation's theme music?" And he was like, "Well, they're using our theme music. That's from the motion picture." I was like, "Whoa, okay, well." I hated The Next Generation when it first came out, and I refused to watch episodes because there was only one Star Trek, and that was Kirk, Spock, McCoy. Even Walter was part of that, generation, the original generation. But, being a Trekkie, I kind of warmed up to it. What about you? Did you, first season, were you there, or did it take a while?
Yeah, I was there. So I did a quick peek, and it was September of 87.
Okay.
I remembered this because I was in school, and I was kind of hyped for it, and I got my roommates and other people together, and I said, the new Star Trek is going to come on, and I was real excited, and yeah, that first episode, Encounter at Farpoint, I was somewhat disappointed. I was expecting, I guess, what we were used to, which was, like you're saying, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and here's this captain who surrenders the Enterprise in the first episode. I was like, what? You don't surrender the ship? Come on, man. So, it was like, what are they doing with this show? And admittedly, like my bridge behind me here, it looked much more like a lounge or something than a Starfleet bridge, so it threw me off quite a bit.
Where are the Starbucks drinks?
Right.
They should all be, in this lounge.
Sipping their frappuccinos or whatever. And Data would be leaning back in his comms station or whatever. But it did grow on me. I felt like, it was probably somewhere in the third season where I started to really think, well, okay, this show is really starting to feel like Star Trek to me. But I'm glad I stuck with it. Nowadays, sometimes I'll watch 3 episodes of a show and I'm out of here. Can't stand it. I'm gone. So I did stick with it. But they've had some real rough episodes those first few seasons.
I will say what happened with me was just like the original series. If you don't see certain episodes after a while, even though they're stinkers, there are character developments, there are lines and little things that you appreciate more the second, third, fourth time viewing. Case in point, Riker and Data meeting on the holodeck for the first time. And Data trying to whistle. And I go back to it and think, the man can, jump down a missile silo. The man is able to outrun and out. But something as intricate as whistling. I wonder if he ever mastered it. We never found out.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if he ever did it again I don't recall him ever doing it again in an episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was an interesting character. I mean, at first blush, you could just say, oh, well, they're trying to do another Spock character.
Right.
They've got their outsider character for the show. But, Data turned out to be a lot more than that. Of course, he was that window on humanity that in the same way that Spock often was. But, they kind of flipped it around because instead of trying to control emotions like Spock was and deny his emotions, Data was yearning to be more human. And
right.
In many ways, he had a very childlike behavior. He was often filled, well, maybe not filled with wonder because that would be an emotion, but he would take in simple things, simple behaviors and things like that because he was trying to emulate humans. I remember there was an episode, and I don't recall exactly which episode it was, where he was trying to master small talk.
Yes.
At one point, he's in a turbo lift with Picard, and he's saying, it's been quite a day, hasn't it? And the weather patterns on such and such planet are very, and Picard's like, are you all right, Data? And I am trying to master small talk. So then he tells him, oh, well, when we get to this station, watch this guy. And so then this guy is so obnoxious. This commander of the station is utterly obnoxious in his small talk and the way he deals with everybody. And then Data just completely mimics him.
It's the episode with the barium sweep where Picard was going to go horseback riding while the Enterprise was getting cleaned or whatever by the Viridium. Was it Viridium or anyway.
I know which one it is you're talking about. Yeah. Is it maybe Starship Mine or yeah.
And they were the guys were stealing the stuff, and Tuvok was one of the bad guys. He wasn't.
Oh yeah,
Tuvok, but
Tim Russ. Yeah.
The actor Tim Russ. Yeah, but Data was with him. Well, did you know that the Aldebaran fly only? Well, yes, but the hibernating portion of their life is even more fascinating. Really, I didn't know that. They just, and there's Geordi and Riker, and there's like, oh my god. But the funny thing is, we all have friends who do that, or at least we've been to parties where it's like someone's talking about like geothermal, rocks and you're just like, oh, okay,
okay, and keep edging further and further away, and yeah.
That was a good episode. That's a memorable one. What do you say, Walker, if we get into, what was it, The Measure of a Man?
Oh yeah, brilliant episode.
That was an early episode.
Season 2 episode.
Okay, season 2. And, well, go ahead. Why don't you give us a quick breakdown, and then we can kind of get into the ins and outs of what happened.
Well, so basically, there's a scientist, a Starfleet scientist, Commander Maddox, and he's been corresponding with Data, and he basically puts in a proposal to Starfleet that he wants to try some experiments with Data because he thinks he can, maybe replicate Data's positronic matrix. And Starfleet says, okay, yeah, go ahead and do this. But the problem is if he does these experiments, he has to essentially take Data apart. So this would put Data in jeopardy because, can this guy take him apart and put him back together again? And, it's questionable that the Maddox knows enough about what he's doing to actually, not put Data in jeopardy of essentially losing his life. Mm-hmm. And the question is, and then Data says, well, I don't want to do this because I don't trust that you'll be able to, ensure my safety. And essentially Starfleet says, well, you don't have a choice, you're our property. So Picard steps in and forces a trial, and Picard defends Data. And they didn't have at this base, they didn't have another lawyer to prosecute. So then Riker is forced into the role of being the prosecutor, which he is really not happy about. But if he doesn't do his job, then the judge, who is an old flame of Picard's, will just summarily decide that Data is the property of Starfleet. So they have this trial, and eventually Picard, because he's such an excellent speech maker, convinces the judge that, can you really prove Data is not sentient and therefore has, should be given rights? So she says, okay, well, I can't say he isn't sentient, so he should have his rights. And Data says no, and that kind of shuts everything down. But yeah, a really excellent story, questioning what is sentience and what is consciousness, and how do we know when something is conscious. And there was a really good part in there too, Larry, with Guinan. This was the first season with Guinan, where Picard is feeling like he's going to lose this case, and Data is going to have to go off and be experimented on. And Guinan basically suggests that, they could make a whole race of Datas, and then Picard says it would be like a slave race, which eventually we know happens. Unfortunately, it's one of my bones to pick with Picard, the series. But anyway, what did you think about this episode?
Yeah, I love this episode. It's one of those episodes, even the first viewing made an impact, and then going back and watching it after a while, it still holds up. The message is a message that is still relevant. Yeah, that was one of the things too with Picard, and it was like, well, you did what they fought and won in court and said you wouldn't. I couldn't stand Maddox.
He was a pretty Weasley guy, Weasley character.
Wasn't it that Data eventually becomes friends with him or something? In later episodes, they continue to correspond, and I
think in Data's day, he says that he had, or maybe that's who he was corresponding with in Data's day.
Yeah. But yeah, they needed another ranking officer, and Riker, like you said, he didn't want to do it, but if he didn't, Data was sunk. That was it. They weren't, and famously, Star Trek was always good at, okay, well, Data's on trial. Well, the captain will defend you. Okay, but Riker's going to have to prosecute you. And furthermore, it's Picard's ex-flame that's the judge. Okay. The fact that they could turn Data off, that they could disassemble, it made you feel so uncomfortable.
Yes.
I mean, at least I felt uncomfortable watching, like, oh my God, it's almost like a violation of one's rights.
Well, it made you question, like, well, maybe he is a machine. Maybe he is. Maybe there's nothing more if you can just press a switch on his body. It forces you to really think about it.
Right, because you can press a switch and turn a computer off or on, or a car
Mm-hmm.
off or on. But there's so much more to data than is off and on switch. If I were to prosecute or litigate the case, um, shoot me and I'll bleed and I'll die. I mean, but what am I losing? I'm losing my life. If you were to disassemble data, or ultimately he does lose his life, I want to. I'm going to take a side trip here. One of the things that they did in Voyager, a lot of people don't care for Star Trek Voyager, but with that holographic doctor, they really went deeper with what is consciousness. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
not life, but what is a soul? What is it inside of us that makes us dream and feel and think and love and envy? And it was what started with Spock, the human condition. What is the human condition? And it was always easier in telling these tales to tell that story from someone who wasn't human.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ultimately, Data prevails, at least in that episode. In later years, no. um, yeah, solid episode. Very, very in-depth look at Data and how he feels. He considers himself to be sentient. He strives to be more human. In his thought process, I think, to better himself. He would be better if he was human. A lot of the humans were envious of him because they thought he was better. He was no emotions. Especially Vulcans were very envious of Mr. Data, as Spock said in one of the later episodes.
I think
Yeah,
it
wow.
was a good episode also as far as establishing and building his relationships with, Picard and Riker.
Right.
I think, especially in the early seasons, they really tried to have Picard be, a real hard ass, and he had a real wall between him and the other characters. But in this case, he's forced to look upon Data as, a member of his crew that he must protect and care for, and he had to really dig into what was going on there and think about Data's welfare and realize what sort of impact this was going to have on him. And then for Riker, we have that whole scene where they're having a celebration and Riker's not going, and Data has to tell him, well, look, if you hadn't done what you did, I would have automatically been taken away. So you did this even though it was, hard for you and injurious to you. You did it, and you did what you had to be done, and I'm grateful.
It was his duty, nothing more, nothing less. It wasn't against Data, and that kind of demonstrated. I think Data was more human than he gave himself credit for. That to me demonstrated the ability to forgive or to understand. This could have affected me in a negative way, but I forgive you because you were doing what you had to do. It
And
wasn't personal.
I think Data, it's hard to write a character that has no feelings whatsoever. That would be like writing, about a car, or I mean, so he's always exhibited some feelings. Um,
Well,
I just,
go ahead.
well, I just think it's, I would have liked to have seen them have him naturally like develop feelings over time. I mean, I know the emotion chip is like, I don't know if it's like fourth season or fifth season. I think I wrote it down in my notes somewhere, fourth season. To me, the emotion chip was like so unnecessary because like we have AI now, and we have, you know, these computers that are going through machine learning, so they execute these actions over and over and over again and see what happens, and they learn from that. And you know, with data in the future, you could see him going through these situations and learning. And I don't know, I could see like the development of emotions. And I thought about this a lot because I've always been interested in like androids, robots. You know, when I was a kid, I would read like Marvel comics, and there was like the Vision, and you know, and then like Data and stuff. When you think about like what are our emotions, how much of our emotions are some sort of intrinsic quality, and how much of them are like learned behaviors? You know, like we see other people and how they respond to things when we're kids, and how much of that do we sort of take in and emulate, you know, as we get older. So I could see Data sort of learning emotions, or at least learning to mimic emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So I think that it would have been nice through the series to just show him like, oh, he is kind of developing emotions, you know.
Yeah. I had read somewhere that was the plan, is that over the course of the series, Data would become more human-like than where he started, although he would not become fully, you know, emotionally, excuse me. Brent Spiner had said he tried to approach Data. It was a mix between Charlie Chaplin and Robbie the Robot.
Yeah, I read that too.
And I thought, well, that's interesting, because I mean, up to that point, there have been movies about robots, and you know, your point about trying to write emotions for a car. I love Herbie the Love Bug. And you know, was Herbie mad or upset? You know, beep beep, closing the door, windshield. There are ways to show. We both have dogs. Do dogs have emotions? I think they do.
Yes.
You know, do you need a soul? I think part of what they were doing with Data is the soul the source of the emotions, or is it something that we learn? Is it, you know, you could look at Spock being resurrected from the Genesis planet in Star Trek 3. Did he have emotions because he didn't have his Katra? Well, he felt pain. Is pain an emotion? You know, we can get into this like deep analysis. What gives that ability? And even though machines can learn to build other machines, or to talk, or reason, to solve problems. And I was reading another article, and they said in the first time in human history, we've started using machines to build machines, technology to build our technology. That's why things are getting smaller, faster. I think it's the reverse engineering from Roswell, but that's just me. So let's move this along. Data decides to become a parent.
Yes.
And you know, I think that's the episode where Picard's talking to Riker, and he's like, "Well, we're in this much trouble. Oh, now we're about here. I may be wrong, but..." And Picard's like, "Data, why didn't you consult me before doing this?" And Data was like, "Do the rest of the crew consult you when they're going to, you know, conceive a child?" You know, it's like, okay, Data. What I'm trying to say, you know, am I different from the rest of the crew? And he made very good points. I'll tell you, Mr. Emotions here, I do cry on a dime.
No, you?
Yeah. I don't care how many times I watch that LOL episode, The Offspring.
Heartbreaking.
It's just, yeah, I give such credit to the writers on that episode. And God love you if you're a parent and you lost your child. It is the most unnatural thing that you can go through. And Data was so poetic in saying, you know, he basically downloaded her consciousness, her who she was, and she's a part of him forever. Well, anyway, won't get into Nemesis yet.
let's not get too far ahead.
But, the whole thing about trying to figure out what Dr. Sung did when he created Data. Did Data have a choice to be human, male, female, Andorian? He allowed Lal to pick whatever form she wanted. Well, she ultimately became a she, but race.
In retrospect, that is so forward thinking. When you think about everything that's going on nowadays, with like so much change as far as sexual identity, gender, there's so much gender fluidity right now for kids and stuff. And the fact that, and this was back in like 88 or so, where he's like, well, I'm going to allow her to choose her gender and her species and all. And I was like, wow, and it was interesting that they went that way with the episode. And I honestly can say I have not, investigated that as far as like what was the writer's idea behind that. But you wonder if, maybe it was, kind of an idea of like, well, Data maybe didn't have any choice. I mean, basically Data and Lore were made exactly in their creator's image, the height of vanity, right? So he's giving his child all this freedom.
And that is something that, I really didn't think about the first time I watched this, but rather than making a copy of himself, my creation can be whomever they want to be. Right. Their identity, and then we'll go from there in learning, whatever. I haven't. I don't know if there's a behind the scenes on that on the Blu-ray or not, but I want to say
Renee Echeverria.
Renee, I think, wrote that episode, but it would be interesting if. I mean, on the one hand, you're writing about a series that's in the far future, where we don't need money and we're not hung up about, race and all that stuff. There was another episode that didn't focus on Data. It was Riker, and there was an alien that was neither male nor female.
Right.
Yeah, and that to me is just a fascinating look at what our preconceived notions are on, who you have to be and what you need to identify as your sexual orientation, and what freedoms, even today in this world, depends on where you live. Oh yeah. How open you can be about something as simple as who you are. But anyway, back to Mr. Data and Lal. And so Lal decides she'll be female, human, and they get her a job at 10 Forward.
Yes, really good scene.
So that she can interact with, the crew, and it was great. The growth of the character, though, I mean, she really grows. At one point in time, she's able to say, like, I can't think of what that scene was, and he's like, wait, you said can't, not cannot, right? And it's like, wow, she's able to do things that Data can't do. Data, did you design her that way? I don't know why. It's like it was as much of an experiment for Data as it was for Lal. And then the cascade failure. Ugh. And there's nothing anyone can do. And what was interesting to me is Data never tried again. Lal was it.
Yeah.
And that's Data's reason, it's his own personal reason and choice. But it would have been interesting if he would have tried again. Anything else to say about that episode, Karen?
Oh, it's just a beautiful episode. I mean, and again, one of those episodes where I feel like Data has more feeling than even he knows,
Yeah.
But like he's unable to maybe express his feelings. It's the way it always comes across to me. Like he's feeling something, but it's maybe he has an inability to express what he's feeling.
Yeah.
But Brent Spiner, just does that character so beautifully. You always feel, or at least I always felt, great compassion for Data. And he was always a character that, like, you could see yourself wanting to be around.
Yeah.
And then, the loss of Lal was just, it was just, heartbreaking. Just such a sad situation. And I don't know, maybe he could never figure out how to overcome the cascade failure. Maybe that was why he never had another child.
Yeah, that could be it. Great episode. There was another episode. Well, Karen, why don't you share one of your favorite Data episodes? We can go out of order. It doesn't need to be.
Well, I really enjoy. I think a lot of people enjoy Data's Day, where we follow him around on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And kind of see everything from his point of view. And we've got the impending wedding of Miles O'Brien and Keiko, and Data trying to comprehend these really complex emotions that are going on between Keiko and Miles. And, he goes and tells Miles that, Keiko has made a decision to increase her happiness and she is not going to marry. What? And,
will you tell Keiko that I'm going to be happy as well?
He's like, I don't understand, Geordi. And then he, I have to dance at the wedding. And he goes to Crusher and he learns tap dancing. And then, and then he's like, oh, now I am ready to dance at the wedding. And then Crusher's like, what? You didn't tell me it was for the wedding. So it's just a really fun episode. But, you get to see, like, how he interacts with everybody. And again, it's just like he's just not quite in sync with everyone else, But he tries so hard, and everybody knows that, everybody really likes Data, and they know that he's always doing his best, and they accept him and everything. It's just a really nice episode.
Yeah, I really like the dance scene with Beverly.
The only sad thing is, like, now that we have HD, you can really tell, like, oh, it's not really him. But it is funny where he's doing the role.
I also like the interaction with Miles and Keiko.
Mm-hmm.
That he had these friendships with his crewmates.
Yes.
And friendship in and of itself is not an emotion, but I think there's a degree of empathy that is involved with at least a good friendship.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to say that he was using them to learn, the ins and outs of humanity, but he did want to help them. I mean, so it was like this close to being called an emotion, but not quite there. And they did that very well through the 7 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
The 7th season was kind of but there was one of the episodes, it might have been Time's Arrow, where they were playing poker. And the thing, it would loop, I think it was the Bozeman, hits the nacelle on the Enterprise and it resets.
Oh, yes.
It might not have been Time's Arrow, but and I think it was in that episode that Data's dealing, and it's like they're playing poker, a pair of twos, no help for the Klingon, and it's like, were you cracking a joke there, Mr. Data? because Worf looks up like, what? Um, he had his moments throughout the whole. Before I forget, the episode with the Sharzenka, was that the Echo in the Night or Call in the Night or something like that?
Oh, is that with the little girl?
The little girl with the web or the long
Was
fingers.
that pen pals maybe?
Pen pals, and that's the episode where Picard's like, we're about right here, because do they interfere with the planet's construction, or Data, what you've done, you've established first contact. But sir, and then Data's like, oh shit, I did. Okay, well. But Sharzenka, and that to me is a sweet episode too, because here's this child crying for help. And Data, the night watch, because he doesn't sleep, takes the transmission up and is like, don't be afraid. Oh, Data, but, and I'm just like, oh my God, oh.
Right, Data was the one who had empathy for her.
He did. And he convinced the captain, he made that argument to save Sharzenka. And when he went there, he let her embrace him. She, he didn't say there and all that. But one of the hard things for me in loving Data, the character of Data as much, is the just tragic way that they end his life in that movie, Nemesis. Excuse me. I know it was a sacrifice, and it was like, no, I'll do this. And that's why I was so thrilled when they brought him back in Picard. And to me, the Picard series is not bad, not good, but the bookends of Data in the beginning and the end, you put those two things, and that could be one episode by itself. But we're jumping too far ahead. Sorry.
It's just because you need to get this out of your system. So we will get there. One thing I think we have to talk about is his friendship with Geordi, because they were especially close.
That is true. And kind of upset me when they brought the Borg on and made Hugh like Geordi's friend. Geordi, you are my friend. It's like, I understand the Borg and Picard and stuff. You could have had a wonderful Geordi and Data. And look, we have had Geordi and Data episodes. Famously, Sherlock Holmes on the holodeck.
Oh, yeah.
I love that. I mean, again, here's Data basically playing a game. It's in a holodeck, but it's a game.
Well, and the first time, it was too easy for him. He had memorized all the books and everything, and it was Pulaski who was like, see, he's just a machine. He does the, if you made a real mystery, he couldn't solve it. And that's how we got the sentient Moriarty.
Dr. Moriarty.
Because, she was like, you got to challenge him. And, then
go ahead.
Oh, and then the computer creates this sentient holodeck creature.
Some issues with that episode. First of all, Dr. Pulaski.
Yeah, I know.
Data solves mysteries every day, and like there's an asteroid coming. Okay, well, let's change the projection of the ship this way to do that. I mean, he's, in real life.
He has problem-solving abilities. So, it's a little ludicrous to say that he
set this up and whatever. So I'm glad she had to sit there and have tea with the evil Moriarty computer facsimile.
She was really mean to him, and she also wouldn't pronounce his name correctly a lot of the time. So she was not a nice lady.
A lot of people say it was Patrick Stewart when he read the line, Data. Mr. Data. Could have been Mr. Data. Had Pulaski been the captain, but...
It is funny, though, because, I think we probably did say Data before the show, and now, like at work, I work with, we do a lot of research and stuff. I'm always saying Data, and I know it's probably because of Star Trek that I say, oh, can we have the data for this? Can we have the data for that?
I want to say it was Frakes who was like, yeah, we all thought it was, data. And when, because Patrick Stewart was one of the last ones cast. I think he was the last person cast. And he's like, Mr. Data. And it just, from there, everyone just called him Data. Even Brent Spiner was like, okay, Mr. Data. Anyhow. What was another good Mr. Data episode? Oh, no, we were talking about
Geordi.
Yeah, their friendship. Geordi saw something in him, I think, that we saw.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily that Data was faking it, but maybe he didn't realize that emotions did manifest. I mean, famously, what was that episode where the Enterprise crew was infected by the drunk thing from the original Star Trek, and they were all like, oh, kind of.
It was the Naked Now, right? It was like the second
Naked Now.
episode.
And Data was infected as well because, his polymer was like, skin was like a human skin. He absorbed, because they're trying to say, Data, you're not human. You can't be drunk. Well, actually, Captain. And Brent Spiner played that great. And I think that's the episode where he and Tasha hooked up.
I haven't seen that one in ages.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go back and watch that.
Fully functional. It's like, oh, Data's going to get busy.
That's another reason, like, when I first started watching it, I was like, what?
But times have changed. Now we're back and we're like, how forward thinking was that? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the episodes I had not seen in a long time and watched recently, and I think I liked a lot better on rewatch, was The Most Toys, where the collector guy takes Data into his collection, and everybody thinks that he was killed in a shuttle explosion.
Yeah.
And like Geordi does all these tests because he's like, no, something's wrong, and he does all these tests on the shuttle, and he finds something, and he's like, it's pilot, it comes up to like pilot error, and he's like, but Data would not make this mistake, and he goes and he tells Picard and Riker, and they treat him like he is, hysterical. And they're like, oh, Geordi, maybe you should go get some rest, go take something to help you relax. And he's just like, no, I know what I know. Data wouldn't have done this. And he's because he's his good friend and he's certain that something is wrong.
Data but then they made that mistake. That's right.
Yeah. But then there's also a very controversial thing, I think, in that episode, which is when Data has the gun, the phaser on the collector, and he gets beamed back to the Enterprise, but it's like, oh, it looked like your phaser was discharging while we were transporting you. And he's like, oh, did it? And he's it's like, he was going to kill that guy.
Is lying in emotion. And why was he going to kill the guy? I mean, he gets kidnapped and he's trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Why am I? And this woman who's a captive befriends him, and I can't think of her name, but he just meets. She's telling him why she's there and what he does, and the collector comes in and he says, "Sit down. I want to talk to you." And Data's like, "I'm not going to sit down." And he says, "Sit down." I comply. He threatens to kill the girl, and Data sits down. He doesn't even say anything. He calls him, and he looks over, and Data's sitting down, and he's like, okay. And the guy was an ass.
Oh, he was awful.
I can't think of the actor's name. Good actor, because I hate you.
The interesting thing was he was not even the original actor that they had cast. They had cast another actor and filmed a lot of it and decided they weren't going to go with him, and they redid with a new actor. Yeah, you can see on YouTube. You can, if you look it up. It's interesting. Yeah, there's a story behind that.
I'll check that out. Well, the guy that they cast did a great job.
Oh, he was
Right.
he was like creepy and just a slime ball.
Smug.
Hmm.
What's that? Cersei's son in Game of Thrones. That one.
Oh, Joffrey.
Joffrey. Oh, great guy. Fantastic actor. Oh, what an asshole. Oh,
Oh,
Joffrey. Oh. Um. Yeah, and so Data acquiesces, and then at the end when he gets that phaser, and it's an inverted phaser, something so that you don't just like, and it
oh yeah,
cooks you from the inside
it's
out. It was this
painful.
painful, torturous.
And the guy had killed that woman like moments before.
Data was going to take her with him. They were going to escape,
Yeah.
and the slime ball comes in, and Data's like, oh yeah. And O'Brien tells you, like you said, Riker, sir, there's a phaser discharge while Data's in the middle of transporting. Phaser discharge. I disarmed it, but Mr. Data, there was a discharge of. Oh, was there? Don't know what happened, sir. And man, again, that close to. I call that an emotion. I'm not going to say that close. He had an emotional
I think so too.
response. So he may not have realized it. His crew may not have realized it, but he started developing emotions
Hmm.
as that series went on.
I don't know any other way to interpret that.
You know why? You know why? Because there is no other way to interpret that. Again, it pained me to see all the growth that this character made, and then
Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk it out. Shall we get into some of the films, or are there a couple more? There's a ton of episodes. We're only scratching the surface.
Well, he does put the emotion chip in. Is it in Generations where he decides to start using it? I think.
Before we get into Generations, I do want to talk about him meeting his mother.
Oh yeah, okay.
He meets Dr. Sung, but he also meets his mother, and long story short, finds out that she's an android as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that Dr. Sung was able to transfer her consciousness. Was that her soul? Was it her spirit? Or was it just her memories? Open to interpretation.
She didn't know she was an android, and Data let her believe she was human.
Again, a lie to help someone be at peace, to be at rest, to do the greater good, because he loved her, maybe.
Who knows?
Also, with Data lore, when he meets Dr. Sung, and unfortunately, things do not go well for Dr. Sung.
Well, because lore shows up.
Lore shows up, but he's able to tell Data just, huh?
The little shit.
Oh, yeah. He's able to tell Data how proud he is of him, and he even tries to tell Lore, no, that's not. But Lore's like, and the episode where Data shuts Lore down, and he says, "I love you, brother." Ooh. And Data's like, sorry. You were a bad boy, Lore. Yeah. So, we got to talk about future past, where Data's a professor at, was it Harvard or not Harvard? Oh God.
Wait, all you mean the finale, All Good Things?
The All Good Things, the finale, yeah.
Yes, and he's got his gray streak in his hair, and
I'm like, oh, Data has a good future ahead of him.
Yes, that would be a very preferable future.
What a wonderful way. And this is going to tie into Picard, but the series, but when Jean-Luc sits with them at the end of that episode and plays poker and uses poker vernacular, Joker's wild, and they're all like, and he says, I should have done this a long time ago. And I think, Captain Jericho came on board when they had that covert mission in the Kardashians.
Please, God,
Don't
no.
trust the Kardashians.
No, with their puffy lips.
But the Cardassian underground, whatever, captures Picard. Oh, no, that wasn't Captain Jericho. Captain Jericho was the Jellicoe. He was a mean mofo, like Picard was in season 1, kind of.
He ran a tight ship,
It makes me wonder if Picard ran the Stargazer that way, or did he kind of grow into that role as well? I don't know. Something to talk about on our Picard episode.
Yes, the Picard episode.
So here we are into the Next Generation cinematic universe. Data is on board Generations.
Mm-hmm.
Other than him, well, no, let's talk about the emotion chip, because he feels the need to. Geordi tries to caution him. Well, Geordi, I got to do what I got to do. And to me, he didn't really display emotions. He kind of became like a comic sidekick, kind of.
Yeah, they used it for comedic effect, right? So you can have like Data go, "Oh shit!"
Yeah, which was fun.
But that seemed to be the main place they went. I think it's hard in a 2-hour movie to explore what does it mean to turn on his emotion chip. It's something you could do much better in a weekly series rather than a film.
I could be wrong, but I don't think any of the Data Has Emotions episodes that we've discussed had a comedic, maybe a slight comedic part to it, but they played this, like you said, like a comic role.
Mm-hmm.
And Spiner does great comedy, but taking the tricorder going like, make it so, and it's like you're mocking the cat.
It's a bit much.
What was it, Mr. Data? Scan for life forms. I love scanning for life forms.
Life forms. Yeah.
And they're all like, Data? It was more like he was drunk than having emotions, to me. Not one of my favorite Star Trek movies to begin with, but what you gonna do?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we leave Generations, and we go to
First Contact.
And I hope you all had a good First Contact day back in April. That was just a great. Well, go ahead, Karen. What did you think of First Contact?
I mean, of the Next Generation films, that's my favorite by far.
Right.
And even of all the Star Trek films, I would probably put it in the top 3. Just such a solid movie, good story, very exciting, and actually pretty much gave all the characters something to do, which it's a big cast, so that's pretty good. But Data has a definite role to play with the Borg in this, and some nice interactions with the captain, the Borg Queen. So yeah, it's I think it's a good film for him. The whole aspect of was he really tempted to join the Borg, and you get that scene towards the end with Picard where he says, for a moment I was tempted, and Picard's like, how long of a moment? And he says something like 0.006 seconds. For an android, almost a lifetime.
Almost a lifetime. Yeah, that to me is a great great movie. You're right. Not only did Data have a lot to do, Geordi no longer had the visor, so LeVar could act now with his eyebrows and bat an eyelash. Marina Sirtis, again, you're going to play comedy, get someone drunk. That's great comedy. Yeah, just a really, really good movie.
There's that one moment where they go down in the missile silo, and Picard puts his hand on the what's supposed to be the rocket, and Data looks at him and watches, and he's like, just touching the rocket, it's, oh yes, Data, sometimes the sense of touch gives us much more. And then, Data starts touching it, and then the doctor's like, well, if you guys are having a moment, then. Again, it's like that sort of learning process that Data is always trying to go through,
Right. It was, yeah. Well, again, at that point in time, the cast was so familiar with themselves, and Brent Spiner, they all do great jobs with their characters, but at that point, he had Data down. I mean, So, unfortunately, the next couple of films for the Next Generation was kind of what is it? Insurrection, I think, was the
Insurrection
third one.
Was next, yeah.
I don't know. Other than Data being a flotation device in the lake or the river, whatever.
Yeah, we're back to the comedic aspect of it.
It was, trying to get, Data loses his sensibilities because of this chip that turns on because of danger to whatever the prime directive or whatnot. And they have him chasing them in a ship, and he's upside down, and they're trying to get him to like a diversion, and they get him to sing opera or something. I'm like,
well, this is what happens is when these actors get more power, they work stuff into the script. It's like Shatner working horses into, different Star Trek movies, or,
The horses I'm okay with. Did Spiner want to do more comedy? Was that his thing?
Well, he wanted to sing because he likes to sing, right? Okay. And Stewart wanted to be more an action guy, so then we wind up with like dune buggies and stuff, in the next film. I mean, and they had singing in that. It's like, yeah, they just get too much script control after a while. It's like, well, you had Stewart and Spiner with a lot of script control in the later films. Yeah,
that was a stinky movie. I gotta say. I mean, it's too bad, and not that they had control or whatever. It just, I don't know. So what was it? Insurrection, and then
your favorite movie of all time?
Nemesis.
Your nemesis.
A lot of people say it came out in the December, the same year as Lord of the Rings, Fellowship, and that's why it went, because everyone wanted to go to the Shire and not. But it had some good actors in it. And I can't think of their names. There's a guy that played Hellboy.
Oh, Ron
Perlman.
Yeah.
They gave him little or nothing to do. The guy is a great actor.
Well, and he's under so much makeup. I mean, he was a
Romulan.
A Reman, yeah.
A Reman, yeah. And they talked about Romulus and Remulus in the series, and they looked like vampires, and
yeah.
And then Picard's clone or his child or whatever was played by Bane.
Tom Hardy.
Will surrender.
Yeah,
Hardy.
It was one of his early roles. It was before he was. Yeah, again, it was sort of like, I don't know why. The whole plot didn't make a lot of sense. Like, why a Picard clone?
Yeah, and there was an episode that dealt with that at one point in time as well. But
yeah,
I love Gladiator. I think that's a great movie. And I was reading Starlog, and they're like, "Oh, the script writer for Gladiator's working with Brent Spiner. They're working on Nemesis, and everyone's excited." And yeah, I bought into the hoopla. I'm a Trekkie, and I'm like, "Oh my God, we're gonna get this like epic Gladiator Star Trek movie," and then the shitburger shows up.
Yeah, well, there was a lot they were trying to do because you had all the stuff with Picard, but then you had the subplot with Data, with B4, which, again, it was like, why? What, we already had lore. Now we're bringing in this other android, and then, and I hate to say it, they made him, this dumbass android. It's kind of like, where are we going with this?
I have a very hard time believing that when Data was activated, he was like, "Oh, hello, my name is Data. Can I?" Lol didn't turn out that way. I mean, Lol was like, "Father, can I?" Not, "Hey, father." Yeah.
Well, it just felt kind of insulting in some
That's like
way.
they resurrected Jerry Lewis and made him an android. I mean, that's what beef. It's like.
Yeah, it felt like very dated, low comedy, sort of. It was just, it was very uncomfortable.
And that there was a piece of Data locked in there. They kind of did like a Star Trek 2 or Star Trek 3 Remember
Yeah, you're right.
moment. I look, if they were to get a movie after Nemesis, I don't know where they were going to go with it. But nothing came after Nemesis.
Yeah, it was sort of like they were creating their own back door because it was like, well, we're going to kill off Data. But then by having B4, it was sort of like an escape clause, right? Because if they wanted to make another movie and they wanted to bring him back, it's like, well, we'll have this other android with all of Data's memories.
We'll just flip a switch. And how do you get Spiner to come back? I want to direct. Oh, okay. Well, we'll do didn't happen. So there are episodes of Enterprise that has Spiner not playing Data, but I think Sung's grandfather or
Arik Sung.
Yeah.
Well, he was making Supermen. He wasn't making
androids.
Yeah. So they had that whole 2 or 3-parter with the superhuman kids, and yeah.
I will say I've only seen a couple of Enterprise episodes, but that's okay.
You should give it a chance.
Karen is right. Karen is a fan of Enterprise. I'm a fan of Voyager. At some point, she'll watch Voyager. I'll watch Enterprise.
I've seen Voyager. I just haven't gone back and watched it all over again.
You watched the whole thing?
I watched pretty much all of it. I watched a good chunk of the episodes when they came out, and then I've watched most of the episodes on Netflix since then, but not like multiple viewings.
Didn't you love the Doctor character? I mean, you had a problem with Seven.
I like the Doctor, and I like how the Doctor and Seven interact. And sometimes I like Janeway. and I like Tuvok. And Tuvix, but he didn't last very long. But yeah, all the other characters I think are just bland, vanilla pudding characters that I can't stand. Harry's boring.
Oh.
Chakotay's boring. Paris is boring.
Chakotay is a little boring.
Neelix is obnoxious.
Paris. There's a character on there named Paris. I don't remember. No.
See? Vanilla pudding.
Well, hey, look,
So there you go.
Yeah. I saw Enterprise up to the point where they did the 9/11 story and they blew up Florida.
Yeah, that whole thing is kind of.
I watched episodes here and there. I didn't like the way they ended it to put it in a holodeck, and
that sucked. The good episodes with Enterprise are like the stuff where they brought in the Andorians. Some of the Vulcan episodes are pretty cool.
the Andorians and the Vulcans didn't trust each other, and
Hmm.
they did play. What's his name played that Andorian? Okay,
Oh,
yeah, there were some good
Jeffrey
episodes.
Combs. Yeah, anything
Jeffrey
with
Combs,
him is pretty good.
the Mirror
Yeah,
Universe. I love those episodes.
yeah, couple of good ones like that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll watch the missing
Give it a
episode.
shot.
The blue gel. I have no problem with that cleansing ritual.
Ah, see, that's the bad part. That's the thing. I would say Enterprise is okay. It's not up in the upper echelon of Star Trek series.
Okay.
But anyway, we
We went way
we
off.
we diverted quite a bit. So Nemesis,
Diversion.
we got to talk about Data's sacrifice.
Yes. So I don't even know why. Well, Data decided it should be him than Picard, and he switches the transporter safety beacon or the recall beacon or whatever at
I
the
kind of
last
wonder why he
minute.
couldn't just wrap his arms around the captain and then both beam out. I mean, couldn't you do something like that?
They should have. I mean, but Data, he says goodbye. Kablooey. And then B9's like, oh, he's not really dead if we remember him. Or some kind of horseshit like that.
Oh, jeez.
And it was a bummer because that was the end of Data's story. This beautiful tapestry that they created of this Pinocchio character that wanted to be human, something that we take for granted. Karen, you before we started filming, you kind of brought up this thing where there's a lot of folks with autism that kind of looked at Data
Mm.
as almost like an imprint. Oh, well, go ahead,
Oh,
Karen,
I
please.
was just saying that we had talked about doing this episode for a while, and I'd been reading different things, and I was really struck to find out that the Data character sort of really resonated with fans who were on the autism spectrum. And then reading some of the things that those people had to say about it, and then Brent Spiner finding out about that, that he would have fans, Star Trek fans who were autistic, talk to him. It was really interesting to hear that, because then when you start learning about it and looking at Data, you could understand how they could look to Data and say, oh yeah, that's very similar to my experiences, where it's sort of like feeling like maybe you're kind of on the outside of these things, of like understanding how to, talk to other people, understanding how to, do those things that people who are considered, neurotypical, just take for granted. Like you're saying, we take for granted so much of being human, right? And not to say that I'm not saying that people with autism are not human,
No,
but
no,
the
yeah,
emotional, the
right.
emotional and social aspects of it, that sometimes it's very hard for them to do things like small talk or make those connections.
Right.
So they could relate to Data. He was sort of I don't want to say a role model, but somebody that they could connect with on the show. And it was very important for them to see him and have that character that, represented a lot of their feelings, about how they were connecting with other people or having issues connecting with other people. And I thought, wow, that's really, I don't know. You and I always talk about like how everything comes back to Star Trek. Like every situation in our lives, we have some example from Star Trek. But I really do feel like Star Trek touches people's lives in so many ways and is helpful to people's lives in so many ways. And to think that, maybe sometimes people are struggling with feeling like they can connect with other people. And here is, this character who has that same issue. So I
Yeah.
thought that was really neat.
I never really considered that before. We discussed that, and whether it's Asperger's or you're autistic, somewhere on the spectrum, and feeling anger or feeling fear or feeling humor or joy, and not being able to cry or laugh because of that condition. Um, it's wonderful that character Data, something traumatic happens, the loss of a child, and I wish I could cry, but I cannot. Having a cat Spot, but going through the motions of feeding and petting Spot because that's just what people do. If Spot were to have kittens, or maybe Spot did have kittens at one point. I think they found out.
Yeah. Oh, it was the episode where they all metamorphosed into,
Yes.
or they devolved, I think.
The de-evolution. No, it's an interesting point to bring up about the character of Data, because a lot of us, we relate to Data. Sometimes we feel awkward, in feeling a certain way or expressing, that was an inappropriate thing to laugh at. And it's like, oh, well, sorry, I didn't realize, there are rules to humor. But it's a good point to bring up. I think what we'll do is we'll start talking about Picard. I know I was a bigger fan of Picard than you were. That's something that we'll talk about with our Picard episode. But what did you think of the Data part? And I thought it was one of the most beautiful things, especially if you've lost someone that you love and you've had dreams about them. Mm-hmm. Where you're not in like some of the dreams I had, it's like, well, you're dead, you can't be here, and they're like, well, no, I'm a vampire, or I'm with the CIA, and you're like, oh, okay. But to just relive this part of your past, and it's not reliving because you're actually having this conversation or sharing that one of the best times of his lives was with Data, is how I felt. What about you, Walker?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the Picard series goes, I think those Data segments were probably highlights for me.
I agree.
Especially that I think it was maybe the first scene of the first episode where Picard and Data are in 10 forward on the Enterprise.
First, it's the Enterprise through space, through the clouds. Mm-hmm. It gave like an ethereal, kind of dun 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 dun. And then go ahead, they're sitting there and they're having a conversation.
Right, and I think at one point Picard says something like, well, I don't want the conversation to end. And it was nice, to see them together again. Although, unfortunately, they couldn't quite get Data to look the way he should.
He looked a little puffy, but don't we all?
Yeah. But that was, it was interesting. And then sort of the send off where, the gobbledygook in modern Star Trek, don't get me started. But anyway, they had gotten one neuron which contained his entire memory somehow. Anyway, and stored it. And so, Data's consciousness is there and telling Picard that, he'd like to be released. He'd like to have his life end because then it would give it more meaning for him.
The sacrifice would have been more meaningful.
So, yeah, that was well done.
It was well done, but I have a problem with them keeping him alive against his will for how many years? And the one neuron, who found the neuron? I missed that whole thing. I had so much trouble with it that I haven't rewatched it for over a year now, or close to a year, but that being said, the science of it, pseudoscience because it's Star Trek, that moment where, they talk about life and death, and at that point, Data achieved humanity. Understanding what his life meant and wanting to go on to the next version of existence, whatever that is, was very poignant and meaningful to me. It was a good way to say goodbye to this wonderful character that we've known for over 30 years. I should watch it again tonight. I was starting to crack up just thinking about, that send off. The big issue that I think we both had with Picard was Picard becoming an android at the end, because I'm like, everything that he's fought for, humanity, being human, the human condition. He was a Borg at one point in time, and he's like, okay, I'm an android now. But we didn't give you android strength or speed or longevity. You'll die at some predetermined date of some predetermined condition.
It was so unnecessary.
The
and it makes no sense. Here is this guy who is still living with the trauma of being Borg for a while, and who, everything in him is repulsed at this thought of losing his humanity. And what do? They shove his consciousness in a robot body. It's like, is it even him anymore? Is it just a copy of him? The real him is dead. So what is he? How is this guy going to even live with himself? And he's all, oh, great, this is awesome, thank you so much. It's just like, what? Makes no sense. Not at all.
Yeah. It was like Nurse Chapel. I'm still Roger Corman.
Oh, Roger.
Yeah.
Christine, there's nothing wrong, Christine. I'm still me.
Christine, can you look beyond this? What if I made myself look like Mike Tyson? Would that help?
I gotta say, I don't even know who Logan Paul is, but Mike Tyson, even at like 80, would beat the ever-loving crap out of him. That's all I gotta say about that. You just don't even want to get near Mike Tyson.
Well,
at any age.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress.
Yeah. And on that note, I will. Brent has said he will no longer play Data. But again, if enough money or good enough story came his way. But.
And I don't know, take it with a huge grain of salt. John Delancey was quoted as saying that he did scenes with, and he used character names. He said Picard and Data for season.
Shut the front door.
That's what he said. So I don't know if he meant the actors, but he said the character names.
Well,
I don't.
Yeah. I would have thought it would have made more sense to put Data's consciousness into the android body than Picard's. And then Picard season 2 could have been called Data. Since Picard passed away.
Really? And you could have put the consciousness in a young... but I don't know if I want to see anybody else play Data. Brent Spiner owned it, so...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, I think we've done Mr. Data justice. I thought we'd have to go 2 episodes, but I think went a little over an hour, but we did a good job. We didn't cover everything, but I feel good with what we covered.
I feel good about it too, and it's a character that I really, really love. Definitely up there in my top Star Trek characters. I just kind of wish he'd gotten a different ending, but que sera, sera, and still so many great moments for the character.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this, because in our podcast that we do over on Planet 8, we sometimes ask questions, what ifs, and how would you have ended Mr. Data in Nemesis or the final season of Next Generation or whatever? Do you have an idea or a thought on?
I lean towards sort of what we saw in All Good Things. I would have liked to have seen him reached his potential, and become more human, and kind of like eventually become member of some community, and kind of settled into I don't want to say a normal life, but he could have left Starfleet and kind of just settled down somewhere and just become like, oh yeah, that's Mr. Data. He lives over there, and for him, like the little things in life, the ordinary things in life would have become the meaningful things to him.
I agree. I would have loved to have seen him retired like Riker and Picard, not necessarily in a vineyard or on a farm or something like that. Maybe academia.
Yeah.
Emeritus professor of artificial life or intelligence or whatever. It would have been nice if he had found. There was that one episode where he had the girlfriend, and she's like, that was very, very hard. And she's like, "What did you think about today?" "Oh, I thought about what I'm going to feed Spot, and I thought about. Did you think about me? Oh, when they were kissing. Did you think about me? Yes, for about 3 seconds. It's like, it would be nice that he got to a point where he could appreciate being in a relationship with someone. And, it could have been a Klingon. It could have been a hologram. It could have been another android. But I agree. I would have. I don't think you had to kill him.
Yeah.
I think he could have just, I'm gonna sell used cars or be on a farm or whatever,
Right.
and
Be a teacher, whatever,
Yeah.
and find satisfaction in the very normal, simple things, right? Here's a guy that,
life of
mundane. He used to travel around the galaxy and encountered, all these amazing things, and now he's just satisfied to live a normal life,
Yeah, exactly, to appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
I know some people have written fan fiction where he's a captain and he goes off on these missions and things of that nature. I don't know. I like our ideas better. So Hollywood, if you watch this and you want some story ideas for me and the Walker,
Data eats a waffle.
So, Data's House of Waffles. I've traveled this galaxy far and wide. Andorian waffles, Klingon waffles. I got you covered at Data's House of Waffles.
It'd work.
Yeah, there's the comic hook for a Data story.
There you go.
Well, my friend, until we meet again, probably over on Planet 8 before we do another LarryLand.
Most likely.
I know you haven't had a chance to work on your blog for a while, Echoes from the Satellite.
It's been a while. It might be a while longer. We'll see.
If folks want to take a look at you over on Twitter, where can they look? How can they look you up?
It is Walker K20.
Walker K20. Very insightful. I enjoyed your weekend begins tweet, and of course I had to put the galloping
Shatner. Yes.
Yeah. Giddy up. So
it's a classic.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, my friend. Live long and prosper. You guys, thanks for tuning in. We love you, and we're going to do this more often. Bob's supposed to come on at some point. We're going to talk about Fear the Walking Dead, and oh God, that John Dory is the Data of the Walking Dead for me. I could tell you about that more offline. Karen doesn't watch the Fear the Walking Dead.
I'm zombied out.
Yeah, she's zombied out, but that's okay. If Bob can't get on here soon enough, we'll just do something else with Walker. So, all right, guys. Thanks a lot, and we will see you in the galaxy. Bye.
Thank you for watching. We now return you to your regularly scheduled program.
Pretty good.